You're listening to the Hour of the Time, the last place in this world where you can hear freedom of speech and truth. I'm William Cooper. I want to remind everyone that our conference is coming up August the 1st through the 5th. And if you want to be a part of that, you had better get your registration fee in. For CAGI members or intelligence service members, it's $100. For intelligence service members who have a family membership, it's $150. Everyone else, $250 for the 5 days. This fee does not include transportation, meals, or lodging. Folks, all that stuff is up to you. We have a packet that we mail out as soon as you send in your registration fee, giving you a list of all of the places to stay, all of the places to eat, and also campgrounds, RV sites, and there are a lot of them, real nice ones too. As a matter of fact, Lyman Lake is only 10 miles down the road, has some of the most beautiful campsites, full hookups with showers, and right on a nice, beautiful lake where you can go fishing in the evening and catch your dinner if you want to. Make sure that you have a fishing license, because there's a lot of game wardens around here just waiting to catch somebody who doesn't have one from out of state, because those fines are big ones. You know what I mean, folks? And if you have reclaimed your sovereignty and know how to fight it in court, that's up to you. Also, remember that the intelligence service membership is also open, and it's $100 for a single membership, $150 for family membership. We are not taking CAGI memberships. CAGI News Service will be a continuous, ongoing organization. The intelligence service is a quite different ball of wax, folks. Now, tonight, make sure you're paying attention as we continue with our report entitled The Ugly Truth About the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, by the editors of the Executive Intelligence Review. Now, so that you can more accurately judge this information, this report was published in 1992. CAGI has spent a year and a half with 8 of our best operatives investigating the facts published in this report, and we can find absolutely nothing in this report that is not factual, that is not true. It is a complete, factual, true report. It echoes what other people have discovered when they have investigated the ADL. It echoes bits and pieces that we have collected over the years, but they put it all together. We have duplicated their research. It is 100% accurate. And it verifies everything that I have ever said to you, ladies and gentlemen, about how we are manipulated by these people, the Illuminati, the secret societies. For the ADL does not represent the Jewish people. It represents a secret organization, a secret society, a branch of the Illuminati known as B'nai B'rith, controlled by the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. I've been telling you this for a long, long time. Many of the victims of the ADL have been Jews over the years. And as you will see, as you continue to listen to the expose of the ADL, as written in a report by the editors of the Executive Intelligence Review, as you will see, ladies and gentlemen, all of us are being manipulated. And for any of you out there who may be Jewish, this is not an anti-Jewish program. It's not anti-Semitic. And if you blindly support the ADL without thoroughly investigating them, as the Executive Intelligence Review has done and as we have done, it would be exactly the same as if I blindly supported anti-Semitic organizations simply because they claimed to be acting in the best interest of the Caucasian race or of Christianity. So don't be foolish in this. If you've been listening to this program for a long, long time, you know there is no racism here whatsoever. There is no bias for or against any one religion. The only thing we're concerned about here is truth. We want to know who is lying to us, who is deceiving us, who is manipulating us, who is pitting us against each other, who is trying to take our Creator-endowed rights from us, who's trying to destroy the protector of those rights, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and bring about a one-world totalitarian socialist government. All of our efforts are toward those ends. And when the common man learns how stupid, ignorant, and apathetic he's been, how easily he's been lied to, how easily he's been deceived, and how easy it is for the puppet masters to pull the strings and make him dance, then we can cast off the yoke of slavery forever, and all peoples will have finally a chance to maybe live together in peace. And that is our only hope, is that we, the common, everyday, ordinary people, learn the secrets that have been held from us by those who call themselves the guardians of the secrets of the ages, of which the ADL, the JDL, B'nai B'rith, the Ku Klux Klan, the White Aryan Movement, British Israelism, black racism, all of these things are manipulations of those who call themselves the ones with the only truly mature minds, and thus the only ones entitled to rule. Tonight, the ADL peddles the New Age. In the summer of 1989, the entire world was reeling in shock and horror over the discovery of a satanic burial ground on a ranch in Matamoros, Mexico. Dozens of mutilated, cannibalized corpses were discovered. The grisly details of the kidnapping and human sacrifice of one of the cult's victims, Texas college student Mark Kilroy, prompted Texas state legislators to draft a law stiffening the penalties for satanic ritualistic crimes and making it a criminal offense to conduct certain occult rituals. The governor of Texas convened a special session of the legislature to get the bill passed. But, ladies and gentlemen, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, while peddling bills all across the country that would make it a crime just to think anti-Semitic thoughts, launched an all-out effort to defeat the Texas crackdown on satanic crimes, branding the bill anti-Semitic. Now, if it was true that the bill was anti-Semitic, it would be an admission by the ADL that Semitic means satanic. However, that's not true, as you will see. Semitic does not mean satanic. However, that's what this reaction by the ADL would imply. In its jaded logic, the ADL claimed that technically the bill made it illegal for rabbis to perform circumcisions on infants. Nothing could have been further from the truth. For not only do Jews practice circumcision upon infants, but most doctors recommend it to all male-born babies in almost every hospital in the country as a hygienic measure. The vast majority of the Jewish community in Texas, including many leading rabbis, refused to buy into the ADL's twisted interpretation and supported the bill as they should have as good citizens of the state, which most Jewish people are. Some people began to smell a rat, and they were right. Not only has the ADL been an integral part of the organized crime structure that has wrecked America's youth through the peddling of drugs, but as a pivotal institution within the Scottish Rite Freemasonry Southern jurisdiction, the ADL has been a part of the century-old effort to paganize America under a variety of labels: secular humanism, new religions, and most recently, the New Age. Not surprisingly, as investigators probed the higher levels of the New Age plot, they found that the New York City Cathedral of St. John the Divine, the headquarters of ADL patrons Bishop Paul Moore and Canon Edward West, was at the very center of the paganization effort. This is the same cathedral that George Bush used to attend. While nominally part of the Anglican Protestant Episcopal persuasion, the cathedral was actually the underground headquarters of the Luciferian movement in America. Since 1948, ladies and gentlemen, the ADL has devoted over one-third of its legal efforts to support activity that may rightfully be called the plot to kill God. You see, the ADL has filed dozens of amicus curiae, friends of the court briefs, in legal cases often settled by the United States Supreme Court, whose results have included banning school prayer, banning released time for religious instruction, banning Christmas carols and spirituals, banning celebration of Judeo-Christian holidays. Now, do you understand that? Not just Christian, but Judeo-Christian. Jewish. And most recently, banning the Bible as unfit for the classroom, the first 5 books of which are the Jewish Torah, causing federal, state, and local governments to be neutral on religious issues, as well as compelling them to cease participation in any display of art associated with the Christian religion, whether during a religious holiday season or other time, and banning prayers in courtrooms together with religious oaths for courts and government officials. While the ADL has concentrated upon uprooting the traditions of Western Christian civilization from public life, in effect by throwing Christianity out the front door of schools, it has not ever protested as New Age religion has been ushered in the back door now to permeate society. They don't say a word about that. In fact, while condemning any manifestation of Christianity at every turn, the ADL has used First Amendment arguments in court and elsewhere to defend witchcraft and peyote, and hallucinogen derived from a type of cactus, cults. The ADL has not acted alone, ladies and gentlemen, in this drive to paganize America. It has enjoyed the assistance of some friends in very, very high places. And don't forget, the ADL is just an arm of B'nai B'rith, which is controlled by the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Some of these friends in high places include the highest court in the land. It began in earnest on February the 10th, 1947, when Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black rendered the majority opinion in the case of Everson versus Board of Education. Black, ladies and gentlemen, who was a lifelong member of the Ku Klux Klan and was a 33rd degree Freemason of the Southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite, enshrined the following phrase, and I quote, "In the words of Jefferson, the clause against establishment of religion by law was intended to erect a wall of separation between church and state," end quote. During the period of time when the attention of the court seemed to focus on religious clause cases, roughly 1949 to 1956, 7 members of the craft, that's Freemasonry, served on the court along with a former Freemason, Justice Sherman Minton. Freemasons continued to dominate the court while most of the decisions to uproot Christianity were made until 1971. The southern jurisdiction of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, to which the preponderance of Supreme Court justices belonged from the period of 1939 to 1971, is the self-described New Age jurisdiction, and that was their term, ladies and gentlemen, not mine and not the editors of the Executive Intelligence Review. That's what they called themselves. Not coincidentally, the magazine, the publication of the Supreme Council of the Southern Jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite was entitled The New Age. As Paul A. Fisher aptly demonstrates in his book entitled Behind the Lodge Door, the original intent of the Religious Establishment Clause by the Founding Fathers who shaped this constitutional instrument was to guard against the states establishing a theocracy of the Roman cult variety that would persecute those practicing the tenets of Western Christian civilization upon which the Republic had been founded. Yet through Justice Black's Wall decision in Everson and hundreds of subsequent federal, state, and local rulings, a Manichaean religious cult is on the verge of establishing a New Age theocracy in the United States today. The Founding Fathers, ladies and gentlemen, whatever problems may have existed with their religion in that regard, they believed that each individual had been created in imago viva Dei, in the living image of God, with a divine spark of reason which they expressed in the principle that all men are created equal under God. The fallacy of the wall of separation cult dogma is shown by the Northwest Ordinance passed in 1787 and readopted in 1789, which provided, ladies and gentlemen, that religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged, end quote. And in his farewell address to the nation in 1796, President George Washington declared that, quote, religion and morality are indispensable supports for political prosperity, end quote, and he warned that we could not expect, quote, that national morality can prevail in the exclusion of religious principle, end quote. For it is a fact, without religion, there are no morals. Undoubtedly, Justice Hugo Black's Masonically dominated court would have found these sentiments to be unconstitutional. As Justice Black's son said of him, he was a man who, quote, could not whip himself up to a belief in God or the divinity of Christ, life after death, or heaven or hell, end quote. When he first ran for the United States Senate, public condemnation compelled Black on July 9, 1925, to, quote, retire from the Robert E. Lee Klan number 1, but he closed his letter of resignation to the Kligrap, that's the secretary in the Ku Klux Klan, yours in the sacred, unbreakable bond, end quote. And this man was sitting on the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Having won election, Black participated in a secret Klan ceremony witnessed by investigative reporter Ray Spriggle on September the 2nd, 1926, where Senator Black was welcomed back to the Klan with a grand passport of life membership at the Birmingham, Alabama State Klan meeting. At the ceremony, Black swore never to divulge, even under threat of death, the secrets of the invisible empire. And he said, quote, "I swear I will most zealously and valiantly shield and preserve by any and all justifiable means and methods white supremacy, all to which I have sworn by this oath I will seal with my blood. Be thou my witness, Almighty God. Amen." End quote. Ironically, ladies and gentlemen, although Spriggle's truthful articles were carried in all the major papers, it was the two flagship journals of American liberalism, The Nation and The New Republic, that chose to believe Black's denials that he was a Klan member in the 1920s, in a scandal that continued after President Franklin Delano Roosevelt appointed Senator Black to the Supreme Court in 1937, and since it has been proven. The ADL, ladies and gentlemen, has been among the strongest upholders of lifelong Ku Klux Klan member and Mason Justice Hugo Black's Wall of Separation decision, beginning a year after the 1947 Everson opinion containing this new language. A history of that involvement can be found in the ADL's pamphlet called Friend of the Court, 1947 to 1982. To Secure Justice and Fair Treatment for All, by Jill Donnie Snyder and Eric K. Goodman. In the chapter titled Separation of Church and State, we find the following, and I quote, "Since 1948, ADL has filed amicus briefs in practically every major church-state case, consistently arguing for a strict interpretation of the Establishment Clause. ADL continues to work for a strict separation of church and state, a commitment that dates back to the League's first involvement in an Establishment Clause dispute, McCollum versus Board of Education. In the Everson opinion, the court emphasized in strong language the parameters of the Establishment Clause. ADL stands firmly committed to a strict separation between church and state. The wall of separation must be fortified and strengthened so that the religious freedom dreamed of by Jefferson and the other founding fathers may endure now and forever, an example to the world." End quote. Among the actions in which the ADL has been the historic friend of a Masonically dominated court and of KKKer Justice Black's Wall reinterpretation of the Establishment Clause are: 1. Released time. From the 1948 McCollum case until the present day, the ADL has fought release time from schools, which gives a release for students to participate in religious education. One of the most recent cases was Doe versus Human, which was affirmed when the Supreme Court refused to hear it, and in which the ADL had filed an amicus brief. It resulted in the school system of Grovette, Arkansas, having to end the practice of released time for religious instruction in the schools on a voluntary basis requiring parental approval. In its pamphlet, ADL and the Courts, Litigation Docket 1991, the ADL states that this story time program in Grovette, quote, presents at least two inescapable infringements on the Establishment Clause: impermissible inclusion of religion in the public schools, and forbidden state indoctrination of a particular faith, end quote. Paul D. Human, the superintendent of schools in Grovette, told a reporter for Executive Intelligence Review, quote, "By such cases, the stage is being set for a one-world religion. Kids are being brainwashed to death by the New Age religions, and it has become harder and harder to take a Christian stand. There is no question but that the real agenda of groups like the ADL is to usher in the New Age. The more the New Age is brought in, the lesser the boundaries on moral action. If it's right for you, it's right is the guideline of the New Age. Moral principles are thrown out the window." 2. Parochial aid. The question of public aid for parochial schools was the centerpiece of the Everson decision written by Justice Hugo Black, and there have been dozens of parochial aid suits since then. For over 30 years, one of the ADL's strongest allies in such cases has been Americans United for Separation of Church and State. According to the managing editor of the Scottish Rite Journal, Dr. John W. Bocher, Sovereign Grand Commander C. Fred Kleinknecht, relied heavily upon the staff of Americans United for Separation of Church and State to write his call to arms in the November 1991 issue defending Jefferson's, quote, wall of separation, end quote, which Kleinknecht calls the cornerstone of the Constitution. Now remember, this is the chief high muckety-muck of the Scottish Rite of the southern jurisdiction of Freemasonry. Boettger is himself a member of the National Advisory Council of Americans United Against Church and State that has worked closely with the ADL. Another collaborator of Americans United is Greg Ivers, who wrote the recent ADL call to arms, which parallels that of Supreme Commander Kleinknecht, titled Lowering the Wall, Religion in the Supreme Court in the 1980s. The full import, ladies and gentlemen, of Justice Black's membership in the Southern jurisdiction, New Age, religious cult, and that's exactly what it is, the New Age, religious cult, emerges in a letter that 33rd degree Mason and Grand Prior of the Supreme Council, Scottish Rite, McIlyar H. Licklider, wrote to Justice Harold Burton 2 years after Everson. The letter described Licklider's pilgrimage to the tomb of Jacques de Molay, who had been Grand Master of the Knights Templar. De Molay was condemned as a heretic after Pope Clement V and the French King Philip le Bel ordered an investigation, which discovered that upon initiation into this crusading order, members were required to spit upon an image of Christ's face. The Templars were shown to be a Manichaean cult, practicing a form of the Middle Eastern Baphomet paganism as an initiation into their inner secrets. You see, their research has confirmed exactly my research and the research of CAGI members that resulted in over 40 hours of airtime of our Mystery Babylon series. After Jacques de Molay was executed in 1314 as 19th century Scottish Rite Supreme Commander, General Albert Pike stated in his book, Morals and Dogma, renegade Templars traveling to Scotland helped King Bruce found a precursor of the Scottish Rite, which is also part of the ritual of the New Age Southern jurisdiction known as the 30th degree Night Kadash, otherwise known as the Holy Night, Night of the Temple, and Degree of Revenge. According to Pike, the Knights Templar were from the very beginning devoted to opposition to the tiara of Rome and the crown of its chiefs. Their object, Pike said, was to acquire influence and wealth, then to intrigue, and at need fight to establish the Johnite, or Gnostic, and Kabbalistic dogma. Isn't it strange that everybody who investigates these secret societies ends up at the same door with the same facts? According to author Paul Fisher, the former Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite, Pike, also asserted that the secret movers of the French Revolution had sworn upon the tomb of de Molay to overthrow throne and altar. Then when King Louis XVI of France was executed in 1793, half the work was done. Thenceforward, the army of the Temple was to direct all its efforts against the Pope. Well, you're all sitting out there, and your worst nightmares are coming true all around you, in the newspapers, during this broadcast. When you go to the store, you find that your dollar is worth less and less. You find that your income is shrinking. You find that taxes are increasing, and hidden taxes that you can't even discover are taking big chunks out of your paycheck. Government is exerting more and more control over every single aspect of your entire life, from the time you get up in the morning, even until after you have gone to bed at night. You know that something terrible is coming. For as I travel around this country, people I've never seen before, they've never heard me. They see an ad in a newspaper or something, they come to my lecture, and before I've even said a word, they come up to me and say, "Mr. Cooper, I've never heard anything that you've ever said, but I know something is deeply wrong in this country. I can feel it in my gut, and I hope that you are going to finally tell me what it is." And I've been attempting to do that for many years now. And I'm warning you, the greatest weapon they have against the middle class in this country, against all of us who are free, is the economy. They will pull the plug. When they do, if you have not prepared for that occasion, you will be devastated, and I fully expect that many Americans who are sitting in their living room listening to this broadcast right now saying, "This can't possibly be true. It could never happen in America, and it certainly won't happen to me." I fully believe that some of those people will absolutely lose their mind when they realize the depths into which they can be thrown literally overnight. Now, I urge you to call the sponsors of the Hour of the Time, Swiss America Trading, who have stuck with us through thick and thin. They believe in the message that I am attempting to deliver to the American people and to the world. They've taken a lot of flack because of this broadcast, and they'll take a lot more. But you see, they really believe that what we are attempting to do here is right. When they listen to this broadcast, they hear things that they can't hear anywhere else. They know that there's no fear behind this microphone, and they know that I will deliver whatever message is required whenever it is required, and that it will be, to the very best of my ability, the truth. Now, if you realize real worth from this program, if you understand this message, if you deal with someone, I hope that it will be with Swiss America Trading. But if for some reason you cannot or don't want to or can't get along with whoever you're talking to at Swiss America Trading, I want you to deal with someone. I don't care who it is, and I don't care where they're at. You see, if you're not prepared, you can't help us in the final battle that is to come. You'll be devastated, and we will not be able to reach out and help you, or we will bring ourselves down to your level, and we need what we have to fight the battle. So call now, 1-800-289-2646. 1-800-289-2646. Do it now. It will take a tremendous weight off your shoulders. You will be able to rest more peacefully. 1-800-289-2646. You'll be very, very, very glad that you did. Remember, whoever you are, whatever race you are, whatever religion you belong to, the enemy that you perceive is not your enemy. You are controlled by your enemy, and you don't even know it. All of us are controlled by our enemy, except for a small minority who have awakened and refuse to be controlled any longer. The enemy pits us against each other. They teach us to hate each other. They preach lies. They twist Scripture. They twist history. They fake incidents. And so we end up hating each other and fighting each other while they are moving very carefully, surely, and swiftly in the background to enslave us all. And the quicker we all realize this and set ourselves free, for there is no knight in shining armor riding up on a white horse that's going to do it for us. The United States founding fathers well knew the seditious nature of the Scottish Rite, which President George Washington, in a letter to Minister G.W. Snyder, denounced for its diabolical tenets and for having unleashed the pernicious principles of the Jacobin mob during the French Revolution. Now, for those of you who have not studied history, the Jacobin movement was the old Adam Weishaupt Illuminati under a different name. And 3, prayer. These wall of separation cases began in the early 1960s and they continue today. In the interim, the Supreme Court, with the full approval of the ADL, has been involved in banning non-denominational prayer to a monotheistic God, voluntary prayer and silent prayer in schools, courtrooms, and at other federal, state, and local government functions. In a related case in which the ADL filed an amicus brief in 1961, Torcaso versus Watkins, the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional for people seeking public office to be required to take an oath that they believed in the existence of God. In 1963, with School District of Abington Township versus Shemp, the Supreme Court agreed with the ADL's amicus argument that Bible reading at the start of a school day is unconstitutional. In the recent case of Kenneth Roberts versus Kathleen Madigan, as we shall see, the Supreme Court affirmed the decision of the 10th United States Circuit Court of Appeals that banned the Bible from being in the schoolroom unless a teacher hid it in his desk. It cannot even be on the shelf in the library. In its pamphlet, Friend of the Court, the ADL argues that it is seeking to keep the government completely out of religion and vice versa, lest the Jewish minority be overwhelmed by a Christian minority. Do you understand what I just said, ladies and gentlemen? But at the same time, while claiming to protect Jewry, the Bible is outlawed from the school, even from the school library, which includes, ladies and gentlemen, the Torah. So in the guise of defending Jewry against Christianity, Jews also are prohibited from taking their holy book into school, having it in school, or reading it in the school library. Also from saying prayers. It protects no one. It takes away the right to practice the religion of your choice for all of us, every single one of us. Jew, Gentile, the followers of the Prophet Muhammad, Buddhists, those who follow the Shinto way, Taoism, it doesn't matter. Quote, "The horrible consequences of an officially sponsored religion can be seen in the Crusades and in one of the darkest periods in Jewish history, the Spanish Inquisition. ADL works to ensure a strict separation of church and state so as to protect minority religions. Judaism is a central concern for the League," end quote. Now children saying a prayer in school are carrying a copy of their own personal religious book, whatever it may be, are now compared to the Spanish Inquisition. Do you see how things are twisted, ladies and gentlemen? But the ADL's hostility, rather than being directed against Christianity, is actually directed against the entirety of all of the Judeo-Christian tradition, including Jews, especially Orthodox Jews. It's demonstrated when the ADL filed amicus briefs to ban display of the 10 Commandments in the classroom in cases paralleling the school prayer issue. Perhaps the most ironic case, given the ADL's claims to represent Jewish interests, was its stand in the 1980 Ten Commandments case, Stone versus Graham, where the plaintiffs challenged a Kentucky statute which required the posting of the 10 Commandments in each school classroom. The ADL ended up fighting a small print statement after the last commandment, which read, listen to this, folks, this is what they fought. Quote, "The secular application of the 10 Commandments is clearly seen in its adoption as the fundamental legal code of Western civilization and the common law of the United States," end quote. And this is something that should be taught in every single class which teaches Western civilization, because it is absolutely true. In November 1980, the ADL agreed with the Supreme Court's decision that this was unconstitutional. And 4, Christmas carols, hymns, and spirituals, nearly all of these song forms, which are a most efficient prophylactic to protect children from the horrors of the rock, drug, sex counterculture, and are a bridge to classical music, have been all but banned with the agreement of the ADL from public schools. One recent case, Flory versus Sioux Falls School District, 49-5, grew out of a 1978 school board policy which allowed the singing of Christmas carols, the performance of religious plays, and the display of religious symbols in Sioux Falls public schools. Although the ADL filed amicus briefs at the level of the 8th United States Circuit Court of Appeals and with the Supreme Court, the latter refused to hear the case, thereby affirming the decision of the appeals court that such actions were constitutional, much to the dismay of the Anti-Defamation League. And 5, Equal Access Act. Another decision that drew cries of alarm from both the ADL and the New Age Southern jurisdiction that the wall was being lowered involved the EAA in a June 4, 1990 press release. The ADL said, quote, "The Supreme Court decision today upholding the Equal Access Amendment erodes the wall separating church and state," end quote. The case, Board of Education of West Side Community Schools versus Mergens, involved the efforts of a student, Bridget C. Mergens, to have equal access to school facilities for a Christian Bible study club. According to the ADL release, quote, "The court held that student-sponsored religious clubs in public high schools do not violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment," end quote. And of course they don't. In its amicus brief, the ADL argued that the EAA was unconstitutional since it involves the public schools promoting religious activities impermissible from the standpoint of the cult dogma underlying the wall of separation opinion of Justice Hugo Black. In its 1991 ADL in the Court's pamphlet, the ADL describes its amicus brief as having argued the following, quote, "The brief contended that both the legislative history of the EAA and the language of the statute itself reveal its impermissible religious purpose. The EAA arose following several unsuccessful legislative and constitutional initiatives to promote religion in public schools. When these efforts failed, Congress adopted the free speech analysis from Widmar versus Vincent, 454 United States Supreme Court Decision 263, 1983, characterizing student religious activity as a protected form of free expression." End quote. What particularly disturbed the ADL was that by granting Christian clubs equal access to school facilities, where there was an open forum for the debate of often competing ideas, the Supreme Court, in upholding the EAA, had somehow given undue emphasis to the free speech clause of the First Amendment over the Establishment Clause interpretation of Justice Black. Dangerous in the viewpoint of the ADL. 5, religious symbols. As a result of adjudication since the Everson decision, it has become unconstitutional for schools and governments to celebrate Christmas or other Christian holidays with a display of such religious symbols as crosses, nativity scenes, or depictions of Jesus. Instead, what must be substituted are Santa Claus, reindeer, and Christmas trees, which are of a secular nature and tend to substitute the material aspect of gifts rather than the religious significance of the founding of Christianity with the birth of Christ. Of course, we all know that Christ was not born on Christmas, as Christianity seems to think, but in a completely different part of the year altogether. And we all know that Santa Claus, reindeer, and Christmas trees are not of a secular nature, but are part of an old pagan European religion. The ADL has participated in a number of such cases. Among the recent ones described in its 1991 ADL in the court's pamphlet is Doe versus Small, 934F, 2nd, 743, 7th Circuit, 1991. Quote, "At issue in this case was the constitutionality of a public park display of numerous large paintings depicting scenes from the life of Jesus Christ," end quote. The ADL wrote an amicus brief in this case from Ottawa, Illinois, saying that the local government's assistance to the JCs in preparing the annual display, including the use of public land, violated the wall of separation. Writes the ADL, quote, "The brief contended that the city is not merely acknowledging or celebrating Christmas, but that it is instead supporting Christianity," end quote. Yet in the case of American Jewish Congress versus City of Beverly Hills, case number CV 90-6521, when the American Jewish Congress filed suit against the Lubavitchers for erecting a menorah to celebrate Hanukkah on public property, the Anti-Defamation League worked out a compromise whereby the menorah could be displayed along with a large Christmas tree on land that did not face public buildings. 5. Banning the Bible. On June 29, 1992, the Supreme Court let stand a ruling in the case of Kenneth Roberts versus Kathleen Madigan and Adams County School District number 50. That the Constitution prohibits an elementary public school teacher from silently reading the Bible to himself while his students read secular books. The court declined to review a decision of the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals that Kenneth Roberts, a 5th grade public school teacher teaching in a suburb of Denver, violated the Constitution by reading the Bible to himself during the classroom's silent reading period. End quote. Now I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, why would anyone care what someone reads silently to themselves during a period when there is absolutely nothing for them to do except wait for the students to finish their assignment? The 10th Circuit had ruled that even having the Bible on top of the teacher's desk in view of the students violates the First Amendment, and Roberts had been forced to hide the Bible in his desk after he was admonished by the principal, Kathleen Madigan. The appeals court also ruled it unconstitutional for Roberts to include 2 Christian books, the Bible in Pictures and the Story of Jesus, in his 240-volume classroom library, among such other books as Tom Sawyer, The Wizard of Oz, and Charlotte's Web. Also in the classroom library were 2 books that contained discussions of Indian religions and a book on Greek mythology, neither one of which the ADL was concerned about. The ADL filed an amicus brief with the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals to quote ADL in the courts, and I quote, ADL's brief argued that the district court properly denied the injunctive relief when it determined that Roberts was using his role as a teacher to advance religion in violation of the Lemon Establishment Clause test. ADL argued that the Supreme Court has recognized repeatedly that to impressionable school children, religious activities in the public schools convey the message of government sponsorship of religion. This is particularly true when a teacher reads from the Bible in front of students. End quote. Now, someone reading this casually would think that it means that the teacher was reading from the Bible to the students. And of course, he was not. Words can be tricky. And words can tell the truth but convey the wrong meaning, especially to sheeple. However, as even the ADL had to acknowledge, quote, one of the 3 judges in the Court of Appeals panel dissented, charging that the school was converting the Establishment Clause into governmental disapproval, disparagement, and hostility toward the Christian religion, unquote, all of which are forbidden by the Constitution of the United States of America. The ADL's hostility to the basic Judeo-Christian principles upon which the United States was founded is blatant. Its support for overtly satanic or New Age alternatives to Judeo-Christian moral values, while less public, is also clear, very clear, upon close observation. The League's post-Matamoros efforts to sandbag Texas legislation against satanic-related crimes is one case in point. Another case in point, ladies and gentlemen, is the ADL's involvement in one of the most outrageous instances of child sexual abuse in recent memory. The scandal began in Omaha, Nebraska, and many of you have heard about it, but eventually spread to Washington, D.C., implicating officials of the Reagan-Bush White House in after-hours cavorting with male prostitutes. It has been the subject of thousands of pages of news coverage, several criminal trials, and one book, The Franklin Cover-Up, Child Abuse, Satanism, and Murder in Nebraska, written by retired Nebraska State Senator and decorated Vietnam War hero John DeCamp. In late 1988, federal regulators moved in and shut the doors of the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union in Omaha. The institution had been looted into bankruptcy by its founder and manager, Larry King. King, a prominent black Republican Party activist, had been sponsored by some of the most powerful people in town, including the publisher of the only statewide daily newspaper in Nebraska, Harold Anderson, and one of the world's wealthiest men, investment broker Warren Buffett. Following the blowout of Franklin Credit, evidence began to surface that King, along with many of his prestigious local backers, was part of a VIP homosexual cult which regularly tortured and sexually abused area youth in pedophilic orgies. Further investigations, ladies and gentlemen, linked King to Washington lobbyist and homosexual Craig Spence. When Washington bunco cops busted a male prostitution ring in the summer of 1989, Spence's name showed up all over the company's records as one of its biggest spending clients. Spence had high-level White House and GOP connections, and on several occasions had toured the president's home after dark in the company of corporate clients and homosexual prostitutes. According to several accounts, King and Spence were business partners in several callboy services. Back in Omaha, Nebraska, a mad dash to cover up the pedophile activities was launched by local Federal Bureau of Investigation officials and the Omaha Chief of Police, Robert Wadman. Himself a member of the homosexual cult, according to numerous witness accounts, and according to a book recently published, the FBI had a lot of practice covering up this kind of thing, following their director, J. Edgar Hoover, during his tryst with young boys across the nation. Ultimately, King was carted off to federal prison on bank fraud charges, and several efforts to get to the bottom of the pedophile ring were short-circuited. And I might inject here, J. Edgar Hoover was also a 33rd degree Freemason of the Scottish Rite. More questions remain unanswered, but one thing is certain. Alan Baer, a local Omaha multimillionaire and financial backer of the ADL, was personally caught red-handed in pedophile activities. In 1990, Baer was charged with pandering by local police. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge rather than face a jury trial with all the attendant media coverage. Baer's name came up repeatedly as a major player in the testimony of victim witnesses to the child abuse. The Alan and Marcia Baer Foundation was also listed as a source of money to several charities, including the Girls Club of Omaha, that were apparently victimized by the child abuse ring. The foundation also donates to the Gay Men's Health Crisis Incorporated in San Francisco and the People with AIDS Coalition. In December 1991, Alan Baer put up the money for a full-page advertisement placed by the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, in several major newspapers. The ad headlined, quote, "Not all Nazis are living in South America," end quote, was a fundraising pitch for the ADL. Bad judgment on the part of the ADL, or merely one more instance of raising the curtain on who they really are? The ADL showing its true colors? Ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. Good night, and God bless you all.